Counting double-digit thousands.
People, what's happening? This is your boy CT Racer X. Today we're going to be talking about how to change out your 2015 through 2019 Corvette Z06 heat exchanger using the PLM dual pass heat exchanger. So what you're going to need to do is get all your tools and a whole bunch of beer, and let's get started. All right, step number one, pop the hood on the car. If I've got to explain how to do this, you probably should not be working on this car. Step number two, after you've got the hood popped, what you're going to do is locate the radiator area. There should be a scoop there held in by 4 7mm screws. You're going to go ahead and take those screws out and then pull that tray out. This guy right here. Number three, after you've gotten the tray off of the radiator, the next step is to remove your intake. Now, this particular car has a Holley intake held in by 3 10mm bolts and then a T-bolt clamp at the throttle body. So I'll be removing that and we'll be able to continue forward. With that said, with the removal of the intake, you'll also have to remove your mass airflow sensor, which has a red push safety clip. You're going to go ahead and remove that safety clip with a flat-bladed screwdriver. You're also going to need to remove a breather valve, which is in this case, on the end of this intake tube here. It's this little plastic dealio right here. You're going to push in that gray clip and lift up on that and remove that from the intake. Okay, number four, we're going to go ahead and get ourselves a beer. So just go ahead and crack that beer open, and I'll wait. Stop babysitting it and drink it. Good. If you're done drinking that beer, what you're gonna do is go ahead and you're gonna remove these heat exchanger lines from the radiator fan assembly. Now the fan assembly normally sits about here, okay? And it's bolted in with 2 10mm bolts. So you're gonna remove the 10mm bolts on either side. But before you do that, first you're gonna remove the heat exchanger lines. You're gonna pry the lower radiator hose off, and you're also gonna pry off the connector down here from the heat exchanger. Again, you're going to use just a regular pry tool, pry this one off. These particular ones can be pulled off by hand. They're fairly simple. This can be removed right here. These 2 heat exchanger lines can be removed with a flat-bladed screwdriver. Then once all of the hoses are removed from the heat exchanger, from the radiator fan, then what you're going to do is pull the 10mm bolts out on either side here. Just pull those off and lift that fan assembly out. Next, you're going to pull the radiator assembly out, and that's held on with 2 13mm long bolts. They look, like that. Okay, so you're gonna pull those 2 things out. Then you should be able to move your radiator somewhat freely. Now also what's attached to this radiator is the AC condenser, so be careful with the lines here. You don't wanna yank on this. If it breaks, it can really ruin your day. Number 5, we're gonna be jacking up the car. Now, as you know, this is a very low vehicle. So what you're going to need to do is have a very low profile jack like this. This is a Schittsburg jack from a place called Horrible Freight. You can get this jack there for about 79 bucks. It's a 2.5 ton jack. You slide that in between the fender and the door. There's a sort of a crack here. It's a body line. Right there is a hole where you can jack this vehicle up, okay? Between where the side skirts sit and all of the aluminum framing, you can jack this guy up. Just get it a little bit off the ground so that you can slide a real jack like this guy right here, this 3.5 ton jack. You're gonna slide that underneath this section here. See where this metal line runs? Right here. You're looking right in the center of the screen. It's actually perfectly here. See that waffle section of metal? You're gonna put your jack there. You're gonna stabilize that big 3.5 ton jack and jack this mother from the front. Put it up in the air and then put it on jack stands. So we can get to this next. Right, we're on to step number 6. Yes, it is black outside. Not just me, but it is in fact nighttime. And that is because I was busy trying to kvetch and figure out how we were going to get this heat exchanger out without removing the front bumper. And unfortunately, on a stock Z06, that is a virtual impossibility. So quickly, let's go over what you got to do. Okay, what you're going to need to do is remove 3 7mm bolts and a T20 star right there, okay? That'll get this side out. You're just going to go ahead and remove this fender liner, fender flare deal. You're going to have, if you have the stage 3 or stage 2 car, you're going to have these little freaking canards that are in the way. So you're going to have to, you know, kind of finagle them out of the way. And then you're going to pull the front bumper here, and that'll pop the edge out. Then what you're going to need to do is you're going to come across the top edge here, okay? And up on the top edge, there's going to be a star, T30 star right here. There'll be another one right back here, another one right there, and another one in the far corner, and then there'll be 2 push pins on either side. You use a flathead screwdriver to pop up the push pins and pull those out, and of course a T30 star to remove these. Again, you're going to lift up on the front bumper, it'll pop it out, okay? Same side over here, depending on, hopefully the car was, you know, unmolested. And again, you're going to have 3 7mm long screws there and a T30 star right there. You'll pull that out. Underneath, there are 2 10mm bolts that are right here. They bolt right up into the plate here, so you have to take that out on either side, okay? There's the other one right there on the other side of that reservoir tank, so it's right there. You can see my middle finger pointing at it, okay? You pull those out, and now the front bumper is ready to be removed. However, you're also going to have to go up underneath here. Depending again on the condition of the vehicle, there's going to be your splitter plate, which is going to have 4 7mm screws in it and 2 13mm screws in it. So you're just going to go ahead and remove the skid plate, excuse me. That'll come out. And then this section, which happens to be the shroud, is actually bolted to the back side of the shroud location, which is right here. Let me see if I get the light better. Right back here, you'll pull this flap down. There's actually like a couple of bolts, 10mm bolts in here, and there'll be a push pin right in the center, so you'll have to use a flat blade screwdriver to take that out, and then you'll be able to use there'll be this plate bolted into this frame back over here. I don't know if you can see it. Dang. You kind of sort of can see it. This rail right here will have 2 10mm bolts holding this shroud in place on the inside of the rail. So you'll pull those 2 10mm bolts out, and then we're going to come up to the top. You're going to then pull 3 13mm bolts out of the top, which controls this black shroud right here, and you'll be able to push the shroud down. Now you're ready to take out the stock heat exchanger and all of its goodies. You're going to remove a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of these little clips in order to get the heat exchanger lines off of the heat exchanger. Now, 2 of them go up to the driver's side of the car. And so up top at the supercharger, you've got 2, these are the feeder lines to the actual intercooler of the supercharger. So you're gonna pull 2 of these bad boys off, and then you're gonna pull the lines off of the supercharger. That's these 2 lines right here, okay? Then again, you're gonna go down here, oops, and you're gonna remove this line, and then there's one other line below it. Let's see if I can get that, show it to you. That line right there. You're gonna remove both of those, and you'll have the driver's side of the heat exchanger free. Okay, now we're on to the passenger side of the heat exchanger. Again, these are just for reference. These are the studs I was telling you about earlier that you're gonna take those 10mm nuts off. This right here happens to be the heat exchanger coolant reservoir. This is not connected at all in any capacity to the engine coolant system, even though it runs coolant just like the engine. All right, you're gonna again pull 2 of those clips off and then disconnect the lines, at which point you will then be able to pull this heat exchanger out like so. Just pull that fuckerino out of there. And if you're really lucky, you get a nice pee stain all over your garage. Okay, step number 8. You've got the heat exchanger off the car looks naked, and now it's time to put in your new heat exchanger. In this case, I put in the PLM heat dual pass heat exchanger. It doesn't have plastic intakes, so it is never going to explode. However, for you people out there in television land, you're probably going to need to use also a heat exchanger reservoir extension, something like by Granatelli. Granatelli makes one. It's like 500 bucks. There's a couple of them out there. LMR makes one. Using that in conjunction with this, you will never run into the overheating issues that are often associated with the stock intercooler setup. Okay, how do you get the factory heat exchanger out of this shroud? Very simply, what you're going to do is on the passenger side, this is what you're looking at right here. There's going to be two studs sticking up. There's going to be two 10mm bolts on there. You'll take those bolts out. Then you're going to flip the heat exchanger over like so. All right, and on the top of it, on this is the driver's side, you're going to go ahead and pull out this E25 star. Once you pull that out, you should be able to lift this plate up, right? You'll lift it up and pull it out, and that will allow you to get out your stock heat exchanger. When you go to put the PLM one in, it is a little bit bigger than the shroud itself, so you're going to have to muscle it in there. But once you pop it in place, bolt it down, and you'll be good to go. This is an addendum to number 8, step number 8. This is the heat exchanger in my hand. This is the front of the Z06. The heat exchanger is going to go into the car like this. This is the front of it. That's the front, right? The scoop, the mouth, right? And the back side of it here, the big side, goes towards the radiator. All right, so make sure you put it in correctly. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to get your front bumper on. Okay, we're at step number 9, which is pretty much like the home stretch, okay? Putting your heat exchanger in place, right? Sliding it back in, bolting it down, adding your tubes on either side. Of course, you're going to remove the brake ducts on either side. They're held on with two 10mm nuts, so just pull those off. And then, of course, you're going to add your tubes on either side of the heat exchanger. There are the metal clips. Make sure you include those so that the units don't slip off. Is there a way to properly install those metal clips? Yes, just put them in so that the tubes don't slip off of the heat exchanger, and you're good to go. There are three 13mm bolts that hold the heat exchanger shroud in place. So, you're going to have to manipulate the radiator and AC condenser, because those two things are together. You have to manipulate those, move those forward a little bit, and you'll be able to wiggle this heat exchanger shroud into place. Now, there is a place online already. There is a video on YouTube, and it's very extensive, that shows you how to fill the heat exchanger and make sure you bleed it, purge it, yada, 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 so that it runs perfectly. I'm not going to go into that step, but what I will kind of preface is to say there's two bleeder valves on the feed unit here, okay? And if you have the PLM unit like I have, there's also going to be a bleeder valve on the heat exchanger itself. That's a 9mm valve. So you just go ahead and open that. It'll bleed and upchuck some coolant. You can use water, coolant, whatever you want to use inside this heat exchanger. I would tend to use coolant since that's what the system is rated for, but you could use coolant and water. I've seen people use just water and it's just fine. Anyhow, you're going to go ahead and basically fill the unit, and then you're going to need to jump the pump in order to have the system load all the water into the heat exchanger like it's supposed to. I've looked online. I haven't really seen anywhere where people tell you how to do it, so I'm going to tell you how to do it because I'm cool. Okay, so how do we jump the pump to fill the heat exchanger? What you're going to do is remove fuse number 38, which is this 15 amp fuse right here, okay? What you can do is you can either put a gold filament spade and then add a wire to that and then jump it to here, or there is a switch you can buy that basically does the same thing. You'll plug it into this unit here and you can flick it on, and that'll run the pump so that you can fill the system. I don't know how much that little dealio cost, but it's not hard to wire up something like that. Why pay for that? Take some spare wire, jump 38 to the power wire down there, and you're in business. That pump will run and it'll fill up the unit, and you'll be good to go. And then, like I said, just make sure you bleed the top of the supercharger up here and bleed your heat exchanger down here, and you'll be in business. And we're on to step 10, and you can see I've brought the daylight back because I felt like it was more fun this way. With that said, this is pretty much the easiest part of the job. It's mostly reassembling everything under the hood. At this part, you can kind of take that sigh of relief because you're almost done. This is literally the part where you get to check to see if you have any leaks. That explains why I don't have the front bumper onto here, because the last thing you want to do is reassemble everything and then have stuff dropping, dripping everywhere, and then you have to take the front bumper off again. So let's check a look and see what's underneath the hood, what we had to reassemble. And once we're done with this part, we can close it, start the hood, start the car, and see if there's any leaks. What you're gonna do is put your mass airflow sensor in your intake tube back. This is a Holley Intech, so it's got that breather line attached to it. So on the OEM application, I'm sure this is fairly similar to that. Obviously, it's gonna be more wrinkly and ugly in OEM. You're gonna put the fan back in. It's got two 10mm bolts on either side of it. You're gonna put your heat exchanger lines back onto the radiator. Reverse installation for that. You're gonna put your lower radiator line, bolt that back to the radiator fan. You're gonna make sure you connect your connector for the fan here, because if you don't connect it, then the fan ain't gonna cut on. You're gonna have problems there. After you got that all bolted together, you're pretty much ready to check to see if this engine's gonna leak or if it's gonna spray any fluid or be retarded, and you'll be set to go. If everything lines up and doesn't leak, you're done with this step. You can start preparing to put the front bumper back on. Step 11, the front bumper's been reassembled. Okay, here on the corners, you're using those 3 7mm bolts to hold the canard in place. You put all the fasteners back underneath, the skid plate tray underneath, all of the bolts that go along with it. Again, the fasteners on the other side. You're going to push the front bumper into place, add the fasteners up here. Okay, I put the scoop in last. I put the scoop in last because, well, you know, it's pretty weak, and you don't want to grab it, crack it, break it, trying to finagle the front bumper on. So that all goes back in place. Little addendum: if you happen to have any P023A, yet you were able to get the pump to purge, then there's nothing wrong with the pump. It has to do with the wire that's in junction block A here. So you have to pull the fuse block out, and there's a bunch of crap that goes along with that. But nonetheless, it's a green and like gray wire. It's a gray wire with a green stripe, or a green wire with a gray stripe. I can't remember. It's a little thin wire. Push that back in place, and that problem goes away, and the car's ready to go. At this juncture, I'm ready to cut this car on and take it for a drive. While it's off, if you want to do aesthetic things, that's really great, like take your front bumper off. Z06 are notorious for having the grill come apart, and that's because at the time of assembly, there's push clips on either side that somehow, just either due to force or tension, move themselves in such a position that the grill can slide out, and that's a pain in the rear end. So fix that while the bumper's off the car. And this also gave me an opportunity to go ahead and smoke the corner lights on both sides. So at this juncture, I think the car looks freaking tits, and we're ready to take her for a drive. All right, so we've made it through. Everything's all done. Car's not dripping, car's not leaking. Front bumper is absolutely amazing looking. The grill pieces are inset. They haven't moved. There's no coolant dripping. There's nothing burning. There's nothing scraping. There's nothing going wrong. The car is back to 100% awesome. And that heat exchanger change, man, that makes the boost really kick in really good. Again, like I said, the only thing I can think that would improve this process any better would be to add the Granatelli or the LMR, or Weapon X makes one. All of the big guys, AMP, they all make a heat exchanger extension. You get that, man, and this car will scream. You can then, you know, put a smaller pulley, tune it, blah, blah, blah. Can't do that in California anymore because now tuning is illegal. But whatever, car looks fabulous, drives fabulous, and my customer is going to be 100% happy. With that said, if you enjoyed what you saw today and you have questions, go ahead and put them in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you very much for watching, and I'm going to catch you later.
Double-digit thousands.